Papa, Papa, you returned. Minerva was about to enter the most perilous situation of her young life. She was standing on that wooden platform, only wearing a thin ivory gown, and she was crying as adult males yelled out figures at her like she were farm animals. Yet this wasn't some bad dream. This was a Tuesday evening in Millfield, Kansas, and 19-year-old Cordelia May was on the verge of being purchased by whoever offered the most money. The Silver Dollar Saloon reeked of bourbon and perspiration. Silas Crowder, the establishment proprietor, positioned himself next to the stage wearing a disturbing smile, pounding his hammer like some perverted bidding master. The group of prospectors and wanderers who had gathered for this revolting display heard his voice. "Gentlemen, what you see here is a genuine maiden, as pure as the first light of dawn. The opening offer stands at $50, he announced. As Cordelia tried to protect herself, her fingers shook. She had been without parents since age 12, surviving through kitchen labor and washing clothes until the previous week, when Crowder trapped her with an unreasonable obligation, her deceased father's betting debts that had somehow become her responsibility. Settle the amount or work it off my way, he had demanded. 60. A miner without gum called out. 70. Another person replied. Meanwhile, Thaddeus Holloway was securing his stallion to the post outside, intending to purchase provisions and return home to his 8-year-old daughter Minerva before nightfall. He had been single for 3 years, managing his small farm and trying to raise his child well in a world that seemed to get harder and harder every day. Then he heard the yelling and crying coming from the tavern. Thaddeus forced his way through the swinging doors, expecting to witness a card match gone wrong. Instead, his blood solidified into ice. On that platform, a young woman who had barely grown out of her childhood was being sold as a product while men thought her pain was fun. 85. Someone bellowed. In the crowd, Cordelia met Thaddeus's gaze. Their eyes locked together for a split second. He recognized something about her expression that reminded him of his own daughter. Extreme fear mixed with a hopeless belief that anyone could help. 50. Buck Morrison, a livestock owner who is known for being brutal toward women, made the statement. Cordelia's complexion turned ashen. Thaddeus felt his heart beat rapidly. He possessed exactly $93 in his coat, funds intended for cold weather provisions, medication for Minerva, and sustenance to carry them through the brutal month approaching. Losing it would bring genuine hardship. But observing that frightened young woman, then the predatory expressions encircling her, Thaddeus understood that certain matters held greater importance than currency. 2000. Every person in the tavern rotated to look. Thaddeus moved forward, his voice calm despite his accelerated heartbeat. In disbelief, the crowd spoke in whispers. The majority of men earn less than a year, with 200. Silas Crowder's eyes brightened with avarice. Well, do I hear 210? The room became quiet, with his palm pointing at Thaddeus' weapon. Buck Morrison glared at him. You sure you want to make a rival today, farmer? But Thaddeus's next statement would change everything and put their lives in immediate danger. Thaddeus said, his voice cutting through the noise, "This young woman is departing with me, but not for the reason you assume." The saloon erupted into confused murmurs. In an effort to conclude the transaction before anyone reconsidered, Silas Crowder banged his hammer. Sold to the gentleman farmer for 200. Buck Morrison's expression contorted with fury. Buck Morrison was the highest bidder. He was humiliated in front of half the community by no one. His palm remained close to his cold .45 as he observed Thaddeus, counting bills with steady fingers. Cordelia couldn't comprehend what was occurring. She had prayed for salvation, but rescue frequently comes at a price. Men would never spend that much money without expecting something in return. Her entire body trembled as she descended from the platform. As if she were an injured creature, Thaddeus approached her cautiously. "Miss, I require you to understand something immediately. You are secured. I have a daughter your age, and I couldn't stand by and observe this happening. You're not going to, Cordelia whispered, unable to complete the sentence. "No, ma'am. You will receive food, a place to sleep, and dignity on my farm once we leave this location. Nothing more is anticipated." For the first occasion in days, Cordelia felt as though she could inhale properly. But that relief endured precisely 30 seconds. Buck Morrison positioned himself between them and the exit. Hold on there, farmer. Nobody spends $200 on charity. What's your actual scheme here? No scheme. Just doing what's proper. Proper? Buck ate. Boy, you just made the biggest mistake of your life. I owe that girl money because she owes Crowder money. I have an earlier claim. Thaddeus felt his blood vessels freeze. What previous claim? Silas Crowder showed a sudden nervousness. Now, Buck, we had an agreement. Fair sale, fair auction. Fair. Buck's voice rose dangerously. You didn't inform Farmer Boy here about our arrangement. Did you, Crowder? About how I already paid you $50 last week for initial rights to this little dove. The crowd started to move toward the walls. People frequently received shots when Buck Morrison became enraged. Cordelia grasped Thaddeus's arm. Please, just leave me alone. Don't be killed because of a person like me. But Thaddeus had already observed something that made his stomach plummet. Near the exit, 3 of Buck's men had quietly positioned themselves. 2 more flanked the bar. They weren't just dealing with a single irate rancher. Rather, they were in a ring. Buck said, half drawing his gun, you have 2 options, farmer. Either try to leave with her and see what happens, or walk away and leave the girl. Thaddeus looked at Cordelia's terrified face, then at his own hands. Hands that had never drawn a weapon in anger. Hands better suited to plowing fields and gunfights. He was thinking of Minerva, who needed her father and was waiting at home. The sensible choice was obvious, but sometimes acting foolishly means doing the right thing. As he positioned himself between Cordelia and Buck's gun, Thaddeus said quietly, we're departing together. You'll have to shoot an unarmed man in front of 20 witnesses if you want to stop us. Buck's eyes got smaller. Do you suppose I won't? You may be cruel, but you are not stupid, in my opinion. The office of Sheriff Palmer is across the street. You'll swing before the sun goes down if you shoot an innocent farmer. The conflict became increasingly strenuous. In anticipation of who would give in first, every man in the saloon held his breath. Despite Thaddeus's steady voice, Cordelia detected a tremor in his hands as she pressed closer to him. After that, Buck let out a cold, sharp laugh that made everyone's skin crawl. Farmer, you're correct. I won't shoot you here because I'm not foolish. He held his weapon in his holster, deliberately, slowly. But Millfield's a small town. After dark, roads become extremely dangerous. Accidents occur frequently. Thaddeus felt a tightening in his throat. Buck was letting them go, but only so he could find them outside the town limits where no one would see them. Wise man would accept his loss and ride on, Thaddeus replied. Wise man wouldn't have started this fight. Buck's grin turned predatory. But you did start, farmer, and I always complete what I start. Silas Crowder cleared his throat nervously. Gentlemen, perhaps we can work something out. Buck, you keep the $50 that you paid me earlier. Farmer gets the girl. You get your money back. Everybody's happy. Nobody's happy, Buck snarled. I don't want my $50 back. What I paid for I want. Thaddeus guided Cordelia toward the door, moving slowly to avoid triggering violence. The crowd parted like they were walking through a minefield. Every step felt like it might be their last. When Buck called out once more, they had reached the batwing doors. Farmer, who are you by name? Like to know what to put on your grave marker. Thaddeus paused. Buck's name meant that Minerva could be threatened and that he could locate his farm. But lying would only delay the inevitable. Thaddeus Holloway. And you won't need a marker because I don't plan on dying today. They stepped into the afternoon sunlight, but freedom felt like an illusion. They were confronted with a maze of Main Street. Thaddeus' horse was waiting at the hitching post. However, Buck Morrison could do whatever he wanted for 8 miles through the open prairie to his farm. Cordelia whispered urgently, "There's something you need to know about Buck. Something Crowder didn't tell you." "What?" "He is not only cruel. 3 months ago, he murdered a preacher's daughter who tried to escape from him. Because Buck owns half of this county, Sheriff Palmer covered it up. Thaddeus felt his world tilt. Their death warrants had just been signed, and the law did nothing to assist them. But Cordelia noticed something that made her blood freeze as they got closer to his horse. A small figure was running toward them down Main Street, calling out in a child's voice. Thaddeus's heart stopped as his 8-year-old daughter came running down the dusty street, her blonde braids bouncing, completely unaware of the danger surrounding them. Minerva had disobeyed his strict instructions to stay with Mrs. Henderson and managed to get to town on their own. "Minerva, halt!" She was too excited to listen, so he called out. Buck Morrison and his men came out of the saloon behind them, and Thaddeus saw exactly when Buck's cruel mind started working. The rancher's eyes locked onto the approaching child, and his grin became something monstrous. Buck said, clearly audible to all, Well, looks like Farmer Boy brought his little girl to town. Sweet thing, ain't she?" Cordelia grabbed Thaddeus's arm. "He will use her against you," she said. Minerva ran hard as she got close to them. "Daddy, Mrs. I came to find you because I was afraid Henderson had become ill." And she stopped mid-sentence, noticing the strange woman beside her father and the tense faces all around them. "Honey," Thaddeus said carefully, "I need you to get behind me and stay very quiet." However, Buck was already getting closer, and each deliberate step made his spurs jingle. "That's a mighty pretty daughter you got there, Holloway. If anything happened to her as a result of your poor judgment, it would be truly shameful." The threat hit Thaddeus like a physical blow. There was more to this than just him and Cordelia. Minerva was now a part of this deadly game, as Buck had just made it abundantly clear. Thaddeus began, "You touch one hair on her head." "You what?" Buck stepped in. "Kill me? You ain't even armed, farmer. But here's the thing. I'm going to give you one more chance to think for yourself. I will leave the girl here with you. Your daughter goes home safe. You go home safe. Everybody's happy. Leave Cordelia with you, you mean?" "That's exactly what I mean." Thaddeus felt like he was being crushed by the impossible weight of the choice. Either save Cordelia and put his daughter's life in danger, or give up Cordelia to keep Minerva safe. Either decision would destroy something inside him. He felt Minerva tug at his coat. "Papa, I am afraid. Who exactly is this man?" Cordelia knelt down beside the little girl. "Honey, my name's Cordelia. Your papa is trying to help me, but it's gotten complicated." "Are you in trouble?" "Yes, sweetheart. Bad situation." Minerva looked up at her father with those trusting blue eyes that reminded him so much of her mother. Papa always lends a hand to those in need. Mama taught him that. The innocence in her voice made Thaddeus's chest tight. It was true that his wife Sarah had taught him to defend the weak, but Sarah had never faced Buck Morrison. Buck stepped closer, his patience clearly running out. "Time's up, farmer. Which one is it going to be? What would you do if you were Thaddeus? Sacrifice an innocent girl to save your own daughter, or risk everything to protect them both? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose, because what Thaddeus decided next would either make him a hero or get them all killed." Thaddeus looked at his daughter, then at Cordelia, then at the crowd of onlookers who were watching this drama unfold like it was entertainment. He made a pivotal realization at that exact instant. "You're right, Buck. I'm not armed." Thaddeus spoke with an odd calmness in his voice. "But there's one thing wrong with you." "Yeah? What's that?" "You think this is just between you and me. However, look around." Buck frowned, momentarily confused, and that confusion was about to cost him everything. Thaddeus gestured toward the growing crowd that had spilled out of shops and businesses to watch the confrontation. "Buck, half the town has been watching as you threaten a child. Sheriff Palmer might be in your pocket, but Judge Crawford ain't, and neither is the territorial marshal who's due through here next week." Buck's confidence flickered for just a moment, but it was enough. Thaddeus pressed his advantage. "You see, Buck, you made this public. The real public. And now everyone will remember the day Buck Morrison said he would hurt an 8-year-old girl because her father wouldn't let him buy her like cattle." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Thaddeus was right. Buck's reputation for cruelty was now on full display in front of the entire town as a result of the spectacle. "Furthermore," Thaddeus continued, his voice growing stronger, "that woman you're so desperate to claim? She's got family coming to look for her. Tell him about your brother, Cordelia. Cordelia caught on immediately. My brother James rides with the Pinkertons. He'll be here within the week, and he don't take kindly to men who hurt his sister. It was a complete lie, but Buck didn't know that. The Pinkerton Detective Agency was feared throughout the West, and even Buck Morrison didn't want that kind of trouble. Buck's rage and frustration made his face turn red. His perfect plan was unraveling in front of everyone. You think you're real clever, don't you, farmer? I think I'm real tired of this conversation, Thaddeus replied. Minerva, Cordelia, get on the horse. But as they moved toward the hitching post, Buck made a desperate play. Tommy, Jake blocked their path. With guns in their hands, two of Buck's men advanced. The crowd gasped and started backing away. This was about to turn into a bloodbath on Main Street. At that point, a sudden voice broke through the tension. Boys, I would not do that if I were you. Everyone turned to see Doc Whitman emerging from his office across the street, but he wasn't alone. Reverend Mills, the shopkeeper Harold Chun, and 6 other armed town people followed behind him. Doc Whitman adjusted his spectacles and addressed Buck directly. Morrison, we've had enough of your bullying in our town. These good people have done nothing wrong, and we won't stand by and watch you terrorize a child. Buck wildly surveyed the area. His 5 men suddenly appeared to be greatly outnumbered. The crowd that had been passive observers was now clearly taking sides, and they weren't taking his. This ain't over, Buck snarled. Yes, it is, Doc Whitman said firmly. Don't go back to Millfield. Pack up your men and go out today. For a moment, it looked like Buck might draw anyway. Consequences be damned. His hand hovered over his gun while 8 armed men faced him down. Then Silas Crowder exacerbated the situation. Buck, you still owe me $300 from the poker game we had last month. It might be time to settle the accounts. Buck's face went white. He had forgotten about that debt, and now he was physically and financially trapped. But what Crowder said next would spark the violence everyone was trying to avoid. If you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button, because it's about to get even more intense. Matter of fact, Crowder continued with a nasty smile, I think that debt just transferred to our new friends here. Farmer, congratulations. You're just taking over Buck Morrison's biggest issue. Everyone felt the impact of Crowder's words immediately. If Buck owed Crowder money, and Crowder was transferring that debt to Thaddeus, it meant Buck now had a legal claim that he could pursue through violence. That's not how debts work, Crowder, Doc Whitman said sharply. Actually, it is. Came a new voice from the crowd. Due to the uproar, Judge Crawford himself had arrived. If Crowder wants to assign Morrison's debt to Holloway, that's his right. But, he continued, raising his voice as Buck started to grin, Morrison would have to agree to the transfer, and the debt would have to be legitimate. Buck's smile went away. Judge Crawford was well known for his strict interpretation of the law, and it was evident that no one bothered to intimidate him. The judge demanded that Crowder show me the paperwork. Silas Crowder became pale in the face. The poker debt was actually fictitious, a desperate attempt to create leverage, so there was no paperwork. I see. Judge, it was a gentleman's agreement. Crawford stated, no paperwork means no legal debt. Morrison, you and your men have exactly 10 minutes to leave town before I charge you with disturbing the peace and threatening children. Buck's last card had been played and lost. His men were already backing toward their horses, clearly eager to avoid a shooting war with half the town. But Buck Morrison had never been one to accept defeat gracefully. This ain't over, Holloway, he spat. Not by a long shot. You cost me money, damaged my reputation, and made me appear foolish. I have a greater reach in memory than you might think. Thaddeus helped Cordelia and Minerva onto his horse. Buck, I think it's over. You were completely defeated. Fair. Buck laughed bitterly. Boy, you know absolutely nothing about fair, but you're going to learn. As Buck and his men rode out of town, the crowd began to disperse. Doc Whitman approached Thaddeus with concerned expression. Son, you did the right thing today, but Morrison is the type of person who never forgets a resentment. You might want to consider staying in town for a few days. Let things cool down. Thaddeus gave a head shake. Can't do it, document. I managed a farm and fed the animals. Besides, running scared just invites more trouble. Take this then. Doc Whitman pressed something into Thaddeus's hand. A small Derringer pistol. It ain't much, but it's better than nothing. Evidently afraid, Cordelia looked at the small gun. Maybe the doctor's right. Maybe we should wait. Thaddeus replied firmly, "No, we leave now while we have daylight and witnesses to our departure. Buck's more likely to try something if we look afraid." They were preparing to leave when Minerva tugged on her father's sleeve. "Papa," the lady seemed sad. "Is it going to be okay for her?" Thaddeus looked at Cordelia, really looked at her for the first time since this all started. She was clearly traumatized by everything that had transpired, and she was pale and shaking. "Cordelia," he said gently, "are you all right?" She shook her head slowly. "I have no idea why you helped me. Men don't, most of the time, men don't help unless they want something. My wife taught me that humankind distinguishes itself from animals by protecting innocent people. You're innocent, and you needed protecting." Tears started flowing down Cordelia's cheeks. "Your wife sounds like she was a wonderful woman. She was, and she wanted me to make sure you're safe." However, the lone rider who had been watching from the hills above town was not noticed by any of them as they finally rode out of Millfield and toward Thaddeus's farm. One of Buck Morrison's men had gone ahead to check out the way home. The real danger was just beginning. It ought to have taken 40 minutes to travel to Thaddeus's farm. Before the shooting began, they made it halfway. It happened at Devil's Canyon, the narrow pass with a road wound between two rocky hills. This stretch had always bothered Thaddeus because it had too many locations for ambushes and too few escape routes. The first bullet shattered the silence, kicking up dust inches from their horses' hooves. Thaddeus immediately pulled the reins, steering behind a large boulder as more shots rang out. "Stay down!" He yelled and covered Cordelia and Minerva with his body. Buck Morrison's ugly, triumphant voice came from the hills above. "Farmer, you thought you were very intelligent back in town, didn't you? But out here ain't no judge to protect you." The muzzle flashes were counted by Thaddeus as 4 men on the left ridge and 2 on the right. They had nowhere to run because they were completely surrounded. "Buck, what do you want?" Thaddeus yelled for help. "I want my property back, and I want you to pay for making me look like a fool." Cordelia grabbed Thaddeus's arm. "Just hand me over to him. Don't let him hurt Minerva because of me." Thaddeus firmly stated, "Nobody's giving anyone to anyone." He pulled out Doc Whitman's Derringer, knowing it held only 2 shots against 6 armed men. Minerva was softly weeping. "Papa, I'm scared." "I'm aware, honey. Just stay behind this rock and don't move, no matter what happens." Another volley of shots peppered their hiding spot. Buck was clearly enjoying this, drawing it out, terrorizing them before moving in for the kill. Then Thaddeus heard something that made his heart race. Hoofbeats. From the town's direction, more riders are rapidly approaching. "Buck!" A familiar voice yelled. "Judge Crawford is here. You're surrounded." The shooting stopped abruptly. Thaddeus took a chance and looked around the boulder, and he saw something amazing. Armed and prepared for battle, Doc Whitman, Reverend Mills, and 8 other locals had ridden after them. "You got no authority out here, Crawford." Buck yelled back, "I have all of the authority I require. You're threatening innocent people in my jurisdiction. The town limits are the end of your jurisdiction, not when I'm pursuing criminals who disturb the peace in my town." For several tense minutes, the 2 groups faced off across the canyon. Buck's 6 men against Crawford's 9. The odds had drastically changed. Then Cordelia did something that everyone was shocked by. She stood up from behind the boulder, fully exposing herself to Buck's guns. She called out to Buck Morrison, "I got something to tell you about Silas Crowder that's going to change everything." And her voice was heard clearly across the canyon. "Cordelia, get down." Thaddeus hissed, but she ignored him, her voice growing stronger. "Buck, you want to know why Crowder was so eager to auction me off? You want to know why exactly he set everything up?" Buck's curiosity got the better of his anger. "What are you talking about, girl?" "For months, Crowder has been stealing from you. That poker debt he talked about, he made it up because he's been skimming from your cattle sales." I kept his books. I know where the money is hidden. The silence that followed was deafening. After that, Buck's voice returned, but this time it was directed at his men. "Boys, I believe we've been firing at the wrong people," he said. While still holding his gun, Buck Morrison rode down the ridge without aiming it at them. His face showed the dangerous calculation of a man whose anger had found a new target. "You saying Crowder's been stealing from me?" Buck made a demand. Cordelia gave a firm nod with trembling hands and a steady voice. "I kept his books for 3 months in that saloon. Crowder took 20% off the top and altered the books to conceal every cattle deal, sale, and transaction you made." "Where's the money?" "Hidden in a false bottom of his office safe. Has to be close to $2,000 by now." Buck's eyes went cold as winter. $2,000 was serious money, enough to buy a small ranch or pay a dozen men's wages for a year. If Cordelia was telling the truth, Crowder had been stealing his future. Judge Crawford rode closer, keeping his rifle ready. "Morrison, this has no effect on what you did today here. A murder attempt is still a murder attempt." However, Buck was already retreating. "Judge, I think we got a misunderstanding here. I was just trying to recover stolen property, my money that Crowder stole, by shooting at people who aren't hurt." "Warning shots," Buck said with a straight face. Trying to get their attention is all. Thaddeus was aware that Buck was telling the truth, but he also knew that the man was looking for a way out that didn't involve more gunfire. The offered exits were taken by shrewd men. "So we're done here?" Thaddeus asked with care. Buck looked at Cordelia one more time, and for a moment his old hunger flickered in his eyes. Then the practical side of his nature won out. "Girl, you come testify about Crowder's thievery, and we're square. You help me recover my stolen money. I'll forget about our other business." Cordelia nodded quickly. "I'll tell Judge Crawford everything I know." "Good enough." Buck turned his horse toward town. "Boys, we have a saloon owner coming over." Thaddeus finally took a breath as Buck and his men rode away. He was aware that Cordelia had just made herself a very valuable witness and, possibly, a target for Crowder, even though the immediate danger had passed. Judge Crawford came up to them, looking relieved. "That was quick thinking, young lady, but you realize Crowder is going to be mighty unhappy when he finds out what you just did." "Crowder can't hurt me anymore," Cordelia said with surprising confidence. "Now I'm not alone." She smiled for the first time since everything started when she looked at Thaddeus and Minerva. It was a small smile, fragile as spring ice, but real. It was quiet on the way back to Thaddeus's farm. Minerva chattered excitedly about the adventure, already turning it into a grand story in her mind. Cordelia rode quietly, still processing her newfound freedom. Cordelia felt something she hadn't felt in years as they approached the small farmhouse with its neat garden and white painted fence. Hope. "It's not much," Thaddeus said apologetically, "but it's safe and there's always enough food." Cordelia whispered, "It's perfect," and she meant it. Cordelia testified against Silas Crowder over the next few weeks, who was arrested for theft and forced to close a saloon. Buck Morrison, surprisingly, kept his word and left her alone, apparently satisfied with recovering his stolen money and seeing Crowder ruined. Cordelia settled in at the farm, assisting Minerva with cooking, sewing, and reading. Thaddeus discovered that farming was made easier and the quiet evenings less lonely when there was another adult around. They never talked about love, but it grew between them like wildflowers, naturally and quietly. When Reverend Mills weds him a year later in Millfield's small church, the entire community gathers to celebrate. Even Judge Crawford was there, and he said it was nice to see a story that started so ugly and ended so beautiful. Sometimes doing the right thing costs everything. But sometimes, if you're very lucky, it gives you everything you never knew you needed. Subscribe to our channel if you enjoyed this story and would like to see more tales of courage, redemption, and the wild American West. We got many more stories that will take you back to a time when honor meant everything and a man's word was his bond. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with a twist so powerful you won't forget it anytime soon. Click on the video.